We are doing the wonderful industry of tin.
Tin mining?
Tin mining. We're doing tin and lead. I do appreciate everybody's input today. It is driving at the wall. We're going to look at the tin and lead industries. And why we're going to be looking at tin and lead at the same time is because where you find tin, you usually also find lead, and you also find copper. There's one thing that I'm experiencing when looking at tin and tin mining is that tin in Britain was probably some of the best tin that can be found on the planet. And the reason why I'm saying that is based on the historical and archaeological evidence. Start off with, in Cornwall and Devon, there are literally thousands and thousands, if not 10 to 15,000 tin mines. 10 to 15,000, maybe 20,000. When I show you a plan, right? I'll show you a plan. It's a small section of a very large map of Cornwall. And that map itself shows so many mines you can't even count them. And that's one part of Cornwall. Now, you can have mines, like in the South Wales valleys, dozens upon dozens of mines, but down there were thousands and thousands. Now, one thing that can be said about Cornwall is the archaeological evidence for the mining industry is still there today, going all the way back into the Bronze Age and beyond. Some of the dates I've got and I've read tells me that tin mining occurred in Cornwall 400 years before the official start of the Bronze Age. Tin would have been used as an item by itself, but very few tin artifacts survive in the archaeology dating back 4,500 years. I'm going to tell you something very close to our hearts. And what's close to our hearts is this. 20 years ago, when I undertook to do a diploma in industrial archaeology, Cardiff University, with a doctor called Philip Ryden. Actually, it was more like 23 years ago. But anyway, back about 23 years ago, the mining industry was still going in the valleys. It was still going in Britain. There were deep pit mines in Britain 23 years ago. They still exist. Up and down the South Wales valleys, you could see the building ephemera associated with the coal mining. It was all over the place. But one thing I remembered, the lecturers turning around, Dr. Philip Ryden, he said in the 1960s, the country was full of evidence for pottery factories. It was full of evidence for iron mining going back to the late 1700s. There was loads of evidence of all types of mining across Britain. And towards the end of the 1960s, early 1970s, most of it was gone because nobody cared. Nobody wanted to record it. And now, all those years later, now, there's a link. So we're talking about 20 years later, I was doing this diploma. And most of what we were learning about had been erased 20 years earlier. And we were trying to work out what was there only 20 years earlier. Now, I live in the valleys today. And every day when I drive up and down those valleys, the only sign that there was ever a mining industry 20 years ago, is at Rhondda, is at the Rhondda pit. And that's the only piece of, no, not the big pit, that's in Blaenavon. It's the Rhondda, yeah, the Rhondda pit, the Rhondda Heritage Park. Yeah, there's the machinery and all that there. That's the only signs that you can visibly see of the coal mining industry in the valleys. That visibly see, watch.
No, you're wrong, Carl. You look at spaceships. No, we look too fast.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
That's that stuff they put on the mountains, wasn't it?
Yeah. Bill, I'm actually, there's something misconceived here. I'm talking about the machinery. I'm talking about where they were.
Yeah.
The slaggies are everywhere, yeah? They will always be everywhere. Yeah, right, Bill, yeah? Bill's thinking outside the box, which is fine, which is fine. But actually the machinery, that stuff that was there 23 years ago, the buildings that they stored the coal in, the rail tracks that the coal trucks went out full of coal, all the big winding machinery, all the big towers, ventilation shafts, are all gone. It's all gone. Yeah?
But that's a lot to do with the architecture and the
Yeah, but there's a point to be made here. The point is this: if we are losing this stuff within the space of 20 years, how are we expected to understand things that are 100 years old, 200 years old, 300 years, 400 years old, and so on? So all the evidence in a few years' time for the mining industry, even the slaggies are going, even the big mounds of all that stuff is going. All that's being, because what they're doing, they're moving all that stuff into the open cast mining that they're doing. So it's all moving, it's all changed, so all that'll be gone. Why have I got so excited about that? I got so excited because Cornwall is in stark contrast completely with South Wales. It's in complete stark contrast to most places in Britain. And the reason why it's in stark contrast is this, is that tens of thousands of mines still exist. And why? It's quite simple. It's quite a simple equation. About 3,600 years ago, I keep going on about this every now and again, there was a catastrophic event. It was the eruption at Santorini, Thera. And that event meant that the northern hemisphere was more or less continually dark for 5 years. Torrential rains, more or less continually. Up until that point, most of those upland areas of Britain and most of Europe would have had rich crops. Within a year or so, all the rich nutrients, because of the heavy rain, just washed all those rich nutrients down to the bottoms of the valleys. But it was in those areas where you've got some of the rich resources, copper, tin, even gold. In those areas, upland areas. So what's different between the South Wales valleys in the archaeology and Cornwall? What is different?
I thought it was
What is different is this. What is different is this. Is that people would undertake tin mining 3,500 years ago after these catastrophic events in areas where they've got no agriculture, areas where they've got very few grazing animals, areas that are bleak and barren, as bleak and barren today as they were back then because of these events. But the way they fed themselves was by finding this wonderful mineral, tin, which up until very recently in the British context was more valuable than gold. And they would use that to feed themselves. So what we're finding is that there are thousands of these mines in the middle of nowhere that haven't been touched. Thousands of them. In just small areas, thousands of mines. Even in 1860, Britain produced 90% of all the world's resources of tin out of 2,000 mines. That's how many mines were still in operation in 1860. 2,000 mines with thousands and thousands of people working in those mines. And then within about 10 years, most of those mines had closed down. Very similar to what happened to us in the 1980s. Within 10 years, 150,000 people working in the valleys went down to a few thousand, and now it's down to 200. So we see these things repeating. We don't learn from the past, but this is all very important stuff. So this is an image from the late 1800s of one of those surviving mines. Mines did stay open after the Great Collapse in 1870, but those 2,000 mines went down to half a dozen overnight. but they had some really large mines indeed. And this is more akin up until March 1998. There was still industrial tin mining going on in Cornwall, except the market disappeared, and the market completely disappeared elsewhere, where they were in places like Pennsylvania and America. They would just be scooping out this tin, just scooping it out, open cast, loads of it, just scooping it out and then refining it. Couldn't compete with that. What you can see from this image is really, really interesting. Other than the fact there's a lad with his top off there, and there's somebody else wearing a white top trying to mine for tin. They both got helmets on, but the only reason they need helmets is just in case there's a low bit of beam in the mine shaft as it goes up down. That's solid granite. And somebody said to me today that I had made the statement. Very, very few people have been recorded as being killed by a tin mine. And there's somebody in my Lantwork major class and said, I watched Poldark, you're completely wrong. They're always talking about people dying down tin mines in Poldark. And then somebody turns around and said, that's because they're drowning down in tin mines. And I said, oh yeah, that's right. And I basically said, well, the only way people would be able to die down these tin mines is by drowning, because the pumping mechanism failed, not because of the mine itself collapsing on them. It was human error. Yeah, the explosions were man-made explosions, exactly. So, yes. So in other words, if you're working down one of these mines, right, and it's above sea level, nothing's going to happen to you. It is not going to collapse. Can you see a single pit prop? Not really. There's a kind of prop here, but probably because you've got wiring and all the rest of it there. There's no props there at all. So this is a completely different industry than the normal mining. Where's the pit props? You just got the machinery in there, and it's really tangled up, isn't it? Tangled up weave of machinery there.
Really difficult to cut into that.
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned last week was this. I mentioned about copper mining. They would mine from they would try to find a face, and they would try to find the seam of copper, and they would see the seam of copper showing at the bottom of the face. Instead of working above down, they would work from below and follow the seam or follow the lode all the way to the surface. That's how they're copper mining. And the reason why they did the same in tin mining was quite simple. So when you think about it, you've got all this granite. Granite is an igneous rock, volcanic rock. Some of it formed some of it formed millions and millions of years ago. Tens, hundreds of millions of years ago. Particularly in Cornwall, it's a really old spot in Britain. We're talking about that was volcanic before life ever hit that area. Okay, so we're talking about 300, 400 million years ago. And what's happening is, as you can appreciate, as the magma is cooling, basically as it retracts, fissures open up. And then over millions of years, minerals build up in those fissures and build up and up and up. And those minerals are your tin and your copper. But they're doing it like this, you see, like a V shape. So the biggest lode is at the top. So what they would do, they would mine down, and then they would work towards the face, and they would work up, knowing full well that the best stuff is actually on the surface. If you work from above down, then economically, as you stand to go into a boom period, you're running out of tin. But as people want your tin, you get more and more and more until it gets to the surface. Job done. That's good economics. Obviously, when we're talking about mines in Cornwall, not every mine has got one of these buildings. Some are very crude. Some are just mine shafts going into a rock face. But these are typical the winding gear house, and obviously that's the exit flue. Okay. Some of these are near the coast, and the ones near the coast are associated with mining that goes 100 feet, 150 feet below the surface, and then they go horizontally and they mine under the sea. And I was describing this today in Lantwick Major. A couple of them, like me, I couldn't, I couldn't go 100 feet and then another 100 feet. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And the risk isn't a collapse. The risk is drowning from water above there, not the sea. So if you go under the sea, there's no way water from the sea is going to get you. It's not going to happen. Okay. What is going to get you is water from the shaft itself that's been drawn down. And if you've got heavy rains and it goes straight down the shaft, that's how you're going to drown. Because what's going to happen in millions of years' time, all those mines under the Atlantic Ocean, what would happen is that minerals precipitate through the rock and then build up. So it's a strange little industry. So in a few million years' time, when they want more tin, you can go back to the original mines and find it. Except I don't think we'll still be around on this planet in a few million years' time.
What's your mineral called? Do you know?
Cassiterite. 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 Cassiterite.
That is green.
Look.
Pumping stations are.
What's that?
The shaft was driven down.
And there was pumping stations.
Yeah.
Hang on. Can I just show you? Can I just show you?
The minerals had been drawn out as well.
Can I show you that? There's an. Oh, here we go. They weren't drift. These weren't drift mines. There you can see. You can basically you've got the you've got the crusher. You've got the winding gear, and you're obviously able to have some pumping equipment down here that can pump the water out. So that's what we're talking about.
It's a different sort of mechanism. It's a different sort of making of tin to coal, though, because coal was wood, wasn't it?
Mm.
Coal is fossilized wood.
Yeah.
So this is
it's just built up. It's just built up natural minerals.
Yeah, and that's use copper like that.
That's basically cassiterite. There it is. That's it. Yeah, that's cassiterite. Which looked very similar to galena. And anyway, just moving back on again. So yes. I know this is gonna sound strange. We've started and we're gonna have a break in a couple of minutes because I did want to try a break at 3 and that's what we're going to do. So anyway, looking at this little plan. What have we done so far? We've done the copper. We've got Paris Mountain up there. We've got the Great Orme. So that's the Roman activity at Paris Mountain. The Great Orme is Llandudno. That's all periods. And Plym Limon is a later mine, but these ones at Llam Mynach in sort of mid-Wales, that's your copper mines, but below that you've got lead mines in Shropshire. So you can see the close proximity with all these. You've got lead mines in the Hackling Mountains, just above Wrexham, and you've got more lead in a place called Frith. And then you go to this interesting locality. This is down in Somerset, known as Charterhouse. And then you've got in Derbyshire and Yorkshire, you've got Alston Moor there. So that's basically that's Northumberland way. So below that you've got Wharfendale. That's going to be Derbyshire, I think. And then you've got further up, you've got more mines in Yorkshire. So you've got all those mines. Those are all lead mines. And down in here, when people say tin Cornwall, tin Devon as well. So this is what we're looking at.
When we went to Wales, there was a museum next door.
Yes.
Cathedral, and they have
It
all
was.
about is it the tin mining?
No, the lead mining, lead and silver, lead and silver. Charterhouse, exactly. One thing we know about the Roman period in particular, when it comes to lead, is that they had lead ingots. And we find lots of lead ingots in archaeology. We want to find lots of them. They found about 20 odd in British archaeology. But those lead ingots tell you where the lead comes from, which Roman legionaries mined this lead in the early stages. The reason why you had all that information on it was basically when this lead got to wherever it got to, they knew of its purity. So if there was some impurities in it, or it wasn't what it's meant to be, or it's wrong in weight, you can go back to the people who mined it and said, actually, that's wrong. And they heavily fined anyway. So there's different ways. Lots of mining buildings have actually survived in Cornwall from the 1700s simply because they've been converted into houses. And look at that there. These guys look so relaxed. It's no joy tin mining at all, but they look fairly relaxed. And obviously, the space that they're mining, you've got to have posts, not necessarily for supporting the ceiling, but you've got to have posts associated with you need lighting down there. You might need posts because there might be a little bit of a fault above, or you might need the post there to actually support the seams, because they might have left some of the other seams on. You don't want bits of that loose rock falling on you, but the granite isn't going to fall on you. But look at that cavity. You wouldn't find anything like that down a South Wales mine, because down a South Wales mine is all sedimentary, and all those layers only want to squash you like a little matchstick under the surface, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So what we're going to do, I wanted us to finish earlier today, and we are going to finish earlier today. We've got to. We're going to take a tiny little bit of a break.